Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Swarbrooke from the University of Plymouth. I have the pleasure of being your moderator this morning. And without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to Harold Goodwin, who's going to begin with a short introduction. Harold.
Thanks very much, John. I think some of this might be quite controversial, deliberately so, because really what I wanted to do is to set up a debate. The reason I wanted this panel to happen as part of WTM is there are people who really dislike the idea of slum tourism, and there are other people who think it's actually quite a good idea, and very rarely do they get the chance to argue about it. So I think you can define it as any purposive encounter with poverty. Because actually tourists encounter poverty quite often. They come across beggars, they come across street dwellers, but what's embarrassing, I think, about slum tourism is that you've got the relatively wealthy entering the backspace of the economically poor and the marginalised. And that can be embarrassing. So it's clearly an unequal exchange, because one group's got a lot of money and a lot of free time, and the other group has neither free time nor money. So it's unequal. And in a way, you can argue that somebody going on a slum tour is intruding into the lives of other people. And there are a lot of abusive words for it. Poverty tourism, township tours, poorism, misery tourism, slumdog, poverty tourism, poverty safaris, ghetto tourism, poverty porn in its most extreme form. But there's also, and I think this is fundamentally important, and I know Andrew will talk about this, there's also reality tourism. It's about saying not everybody in these destinations is wealthy. So it's about experiencing the other, and that might be for prostitution, drug taking or gambling. That still goes on, it's been going on for centuries. But it's also potentially for social reform and as a way of expressing religious concern, and therefore trying to do something as a human being about the conditions that people live in. And if it's always hidden away, people will never discover what it's like to be really poor. This was a TV programme, I think, on Channel 4. It's available on YouTube. This is a journalist living for 2.5 weeks in one of the slums, in fact the one that you first operated in Mumbai, so you might want to talk about that. Now, in a way, you could argue that that's voyeurism. It's exploiting poor people as television. But it also clearly makes people aware of the fact that in Mumbai, an extremely wealthy city in some ways, there are large numbers of people living in extreme poverty. One way that you can think of this is about seeing how the other half live, the non-privileged, the people who never get on a plane, people who never have the opportunity, probably even to go more than 5 kilometres from the slum where they live. There's a long history of this. It's a 19th century tradition, it's called slumming it in those days. Written really as a way of trying to raise awareness. I mean, George Orwell's Down and Out in Paris and London is a classic book about what economic crisis does to poor people. But there's also a risk that it's voyeurism. And we've seen TV soaps, for example this one, a TV to-do list, Slumming It Victorian style, presented as television. Closer to here, The Isle of Dogs, which is a recreation of the Victorian East End, now a tourist attraction. But of course this is the reality of what slum tourism is about. And there's a whole series of issues about child protection, which I think are relevant to slum tourism. There's a session on child protection here later today. So I think there are different perspectives on this. Some would prefer that tourists do not see the slums. And you see situations where rather nice housing has been built along the edge of the slums, or the townships, to disguise the fact that behind it lies extreme poverty. Denial is a major part of the issue. On the other hand, visiting slums can inspire philanthropy and support demands for improved housing and sanitation. The back streets, the townships, the slums and favelas are also parts of the destinations that we choose to visit. They are a significant part of those cities that we choose to visit. The other point I'd like to make is that townships aren't slums, although in much of the academic literature they're described as such. There are extremely wealthy people who live in some parts of the townships in South Africa. You've got all the spectrum of economic wealth in the townships there. I think one of the acid tests in South Africa, or in Cape Town in particular, of whether you should be doing a particular township tour is whether that township tour includes a visit to the District 6 Museum, which explains how the townships came about. And for me, understanding how the poverty has arisen is a critical part of understanding what it is. But it's also a way of expressing solidarity. So the one on the left is actually from North America, about solidarity with indigenous peoples. The one on the right is actually a Saharan refugee camp where tours are organised from Italy each year, mainly for students, but taking people to see what life in a refugee camp is like, because most people will never see the inside of a refugee camp. So I would argue that from a responsible tourism perspective, we should be approving of slum tourism where it's done well. Because what we're doing then is spreading the benefits of tourism to the poor and marginalised. But the key question, I think, for each of the presenters and for the discussion afterwards is how those visits take place and how the tourists behave when they're there. It's a matter really of how it's done. I think the debate's about that rather than whether it should be done. But let me hand over to the next person.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so the idea is we have 4 presentations, starting with the first one from Harold, after which there will be time for discussion. So what I'm going to do is just remind our speakers that there is a time limit of 7 minutes for each presentation, and ask them to respect that, please, because otherwise there'll be no time for discussion. And we don't want it to be a wall of sound. We actually want people to have a chance to ask their questions. So if I can ask Andrew, please, from Reality Tours to take the floor next.
Okay, hi everyone, my name's Andrew, and a year ago, in September last year, I moved from London to Mumbai in India to work for an NGO called Reality Gives. And I want to talk to you about our partners, and they're also one of our major funders, Reality Tours and Travel, who are known, among other things, for slum tourism. Reality Tours and Travel, along with me, believe that tourism, if it's done in an appropriate way, can be a force for good, and it can be a force for local development in poor areas as well. All of Reality Tours' activities, whether they're slum tours, whether they're city tours, there are 2 main principles that guide what they do. The first is that they try to show people the sides to India that aren't known, the sides to India that aren't stereotypically featured on most tourism trips and package holidays. And secondly, the profits, crucially, are reinvested into local communities. Just to very quickly, as we've only got 7 minutes, to tell you about how Reality was formed. It all started when this man on the right, Krishna Pujari, who grew up in a South Indian Raisan family, was working in a restaurant in Mumbai. And he met Chris from the UK, Chris Way, who's on the right. And they got talking, and they thought nothing of it at the time, and they shared plenty of values. They swapped details, Chris went home, and 2 years later, he was travelling in Brazil, and he went on a slum tour in the favelas in Rio. And there were 2 things that really impacted him in Rio. The first was that the tone of the tour was almost poverty poor. It was almost gleefully showing the group of tourists that were with him how poor the conditions were, how bad people's lives were. And secondly, the company running the tour was seemingly going home with the profits. There was no real incentive for these slum communities to even participate. And Chris wanted to create something different and felt that that would be possible. He went back to India and he spoke to Krishna, and they visited Dharavi together. They spoke to people in Dharavi, which is one of Asia's largest slums. It's Mumbai's largest slum, in a city, don't forget, where 50% of people live in slums. There was enthusiasm among the community for this kind of reinvestment model. And before I go on, hands up, who here today feels sceptical about slum tourism? Most of us, and including me, I remember when I applied for this job a year ago with the charity Reality Gives, finding out about this relationship with the tour company, and I was very sceptical. I hadn't even heard of slum tourism. I didn't even know that it was something that went on. And I was immediately thinking about the things you see on TV with Justin Bieber in an African village, you know, being photographed with a smiling family, or people texting their mates back home saying, wow, the conditions are so inspiringly awful, you know, people are happy even though they have terrible lives. And I was thinking about Slumdog Millionaire, which is partly set in Dharavi. So I was very, very sceptical. I reserved my judgment until I went to Mumbai to see it for myself. And on my first day of work, in fact, I was taken on the Reality Tour's educational tour of Dharavi. And I was very surprised. I didn't expect to find myself in a place where I was hearing about and surrounded by things like tech startups and entrepreneurs. My guide, instead of telling me about how poor the conditions were, he was telling me about the recycling industry and how vital it is to the overall city of Mumbai. I heard facts like the fact that in Dharavi, almost $1 billion worth of goods are produced every single year. My guide didn't try to sugarcoat the place because it certainly has many, many problems, but the tone of the tour was very balanced, I thought. So I was reassured. And I was also reassured by the fact that some of the rules, like there were no photos allowed on the tour. The group I was in was very small. We weren't a mob of tourists going through Dharavi. My guide was a guy my age who'd grown up in Dharavi and lived there. It wasn't, you know, someone from the West who was on a gap year running these tours at all. The dress code was respectful. We were on foot. There were no vehicles. And importantly, and obviously being someone who works for Reality Gives, it's important for my job, 80% of the profits from these tours are reinvested back into the community through Reality Gives. And our job, we spend the money on the thing that, after a long period of research in the community, most people were saying would be the best thing to reinvest the money on, and that's education. There was great enthusiasm among residents for us to spend the money on that. And crucially as well, Reality Tours and Travel don't just reinvest the profits, but we're trying to create something sustainable by involving the local community. The vast majority of our staff, and not just the tour guides, I'm talking about our office managers, our booking agents, are from the local community. There are very few people like me also on the Reality Give side. We deliver our education programs using teachers that we hire and train from the local community. And their development is as important to us as the students. If we're going to create something truly sustainable, we need to do that. It can't be a steady stream like many other NGOs of volunteers coming for 3 months at a time from abroad. And I think the residents, by and large, appreciate what we're doing. We're well known in the community, not just because most of our staff are from the community. People respect the fact that we're challenging perceptions. I mean, when I get the train every morning to Dharavi, I'll sometimes speak to local people from Mumbai city, and they'll say to me, where are you going? And I'll say, Dharavi. And they'll say, Dharavi? Oh, well, be careful, you know, people there are criminals, you know, people are violent, it's a horrible place. And that's the stereotype people have of Dharavi, and it's just not true. So the residents, here are a few quotes, respect the fact that we're challenging that. We've had praise from the WTTC. Here's a nice quote, which they gave us a few years ago. I don't have too much time. And we've also received awards. Here's Krishna, in fact. 15 years after he was working in a restaurant in Mumbai, he's collecting an international award for social responsibility for the Tours Gives model. and that means a great deal to us. Another benefit, 16,000 people a year now come to Dharavi to visit, and that includes people from many, many publications and many, many companies. And what's often happened is we've had people come from Microsoft, say, or Google. They've gone home, told their employers about what we do, and then we've had a big group tour. And we've had these resources coming to Dharavi. We've had people like Google come and offer to do workshops in the community around things like computer skills. We have education partnerships with some of these. Wrap it up. The tours bring a great deal of resources to Dharavi, which is very, very important. And I'll finish with the biggest thing, the most important thing to us. When we get tourists, and we get many who are very skeptical about the concept, they come on the tour and they tell us that it wasn't what they expected, and their perceptions have changed. That's what we try to do, and look forward to having the discussion in a few moments. Thank you very much.
Sorry about that, Andrew. Time is very tight, and 7 minutes is not very long. I do apologise. Can I next ask Jayni from Unseen Tours, please, to take the place?
Hi, Jayni. Just give me a second, all right?
Good to go? So thank you for inviting us to speak here today. We did find it very interesting that we were invited to this discussion about slum tourism, mostly because we've always tried to distance ourselves away from that label. So here goes, let's see what happens. Just a quick introduction to Unseen Tours. So we were set up in 2010 by an organisation called the Sock Mob, who used their ice-breaking power of conversations and socks to engage with homeless people on the streets of London. Through this, they started coaching people and helping people with facts, research and dates, and that's how Unseen Tours was first born. Our first tour happened in August 2010, and since then we've employed about 20 people who have gone through our organisation. So the purpose of our tours is to show people a historical and different perspective of London through the lens of homelessness. Our guides weave their own stories and their own facts and their own experiences through these tours, and this basically gives a unique experience of London. And we've helped other people set up similar tours in their own cities as well. So, what is slum tourism? I know Harold mentioned it a bit earlier. But although a typical slum tour is hard to define, people often think of them as being voyeuristic, exploitative, where visitors romanticize poverty in segregated, unfamiliar and inaccessible spaces. So, does Unseen Tours fit into this category? Here are some of our reflections. So if slum tourism is the othering of groups of people gazing at the exotic and economically poor and their lives, but not involving them in the decision-making process, then Unseen Tours is not a part of slum tourism. Our tours are created with and led by our homeless guides. If slum tourism exists to commodify this slum product and the images associated with it, then Unseen Tours is not part of that system. Our customers don't come to see the poverty in London. They come to learn more about London and the history and the stories in London through the perspective of our tour guides, who are the experts of their own communities. If slum tours are defined by the separate and segregated spaces where tours take place, then they're not a part of this slum tourism movement. We have tours in places like Camden, London Bridge, Shoreditch and Brick Lane, which are very much part of the London tourism scene. So they're very well known by the people who come on our tours. And if the money from slum tours does not typically reach the individuals or the communities that the tours focus on, then Unseen Tours is not a slum tourism operator. At least 60% of the money our tours raise goes straight through to the homeless tour guides, and the rest of it is used to invest back into our business and for operational costs. And our volunteers are not paid for this at all. It's all about our tour guides. And yet, there might be a few aspects of Unseen Tours which may be considered to fit into the broader slum tourism narrative, perhaps. If the purpose of slum tourism is to change the mindset of people, then that fits in with the way we want to challenge attitudes and increase an understanding of homelessness issues through our tours. If the purpose of slum tours is to give a voice to the locals, who are often not given a voice in the tourism sector, then this matches our objective. And if the purpose is to normalize the other, then our tours do this through the way that our guides share their own stories and their experiences. So based on that, we'll let you decide if you think we fit into the slum tourism spectrum at all. We do, however, think there are some lessons that we can share from the way we work, which can help responsible slum tourism projects around the world. So we think it's really important that our guides are included in our decision-making processes at Unseen Tours. They make the rules. Us volunteers, we just support the delivery and running of the organisation. Our business model obviously requires for people to buy our tours. That's why we exist. But the reason we run these tours is so that our tour guides have some money to help with their living situations, and also so that we can challenge these stereotypes of homelessness through our tours. So our tours don't require people to remain homeless whilst they're working for Unseen Tours. In fact, just one second. In fact, our volunteers do work closely with our tour guides to get them housing assistance and access to things like bank accounts and benefits if they're applicable. Our business model would still continue to exist, and we would still be able to run our tours of homelessness if homelessness ceased to exist. And indeed, that would make us volunteers so much happier as well. So we hope you will enjoy the privilege of learning about homelessness from our guides as much as we have, and we hope to see you on some of our tours around London very soon. Thank you.
And last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, we have Simon. I think there are two colleagues. I only have a name for one of them, but I'm sure they're in Vincent. So Simon and Vincent from Catch 22.
So it's just a video.
Yeah, so I'm going to say a little bit, he's going to say a little bit, and then we'll start the video. Is that all right?
Just double click.
Just double click this one here.
Whenever. When you're ready.
Do you want to press play for me when I say
Yeah. Hi, good morning. Thanks everyone for coming. I personally feel this is the most important part of WTM, what happens in this space here, because this is where we can possibly, where we will affect positive change. We, like Unseen Tours, who do some great work, we've never thought of ourselves as slum tourism. I guess the reason why we've been invited today is because we are kind of working in an associated field, and massive respect, by the way, to what Reality Gives does, incredible. But we are also in the business of breaking down barriers. Would you believe that we did an intergenerational workshop with some older people in the King's Cross area, and we asked them what they thought of young people, and one of them said, I don't know any. So barriers exist even here in London, and one of the things we're doing with our youth guides is we are breaking those barriers down so that people can speak to a young Londoner and find out how it is to be in Camden in 2017. Now, because we are all about empowering and upskilling our youth guides, we actually have the fantastic Vincent here today. So without further ado, I shall hand it over to him, because these guys are what it's all about.
All right, thank you guys for coming today. My name is Vincent. I'm one of the tour guides for Underground Camden Tours. We do youth-led walking tours of Camden Town and King's Cross, and we're part of a wider project called The Hive, which is a holistic health and well-being service centre for young people aged 16 to 24 in the borough of Camden. And our enterprise basically aims to provide routes into employment by giving work experience to young people and by helping to develop their skills via tourism. All the profits from our tours go directly back into the project. So by coming on one of our tours, you would be directly supporting the youth of Camden. I'm now going to play a short video to show you guys what it's all about.
Thanks all for coming. Great to see you all again. You guys have decided we're having a social enterprise, which is, as you know, tours in Camden, right?
Tour guides would be more beneficial for young people. It would be more exciting, a way to make them come in and learn more skills.
I guess the big question is, what do we call it?
It has to be something unique, something that no one's ever heard of before.
Yeah, as well as it being unique, we need to make sure people can actually find it on Google.
That we might as well, highlight underground, piece of art or, places that, tourists may or may not have seen. And I feel like it's got a nice ring to it, Underground Camden Tours. So, who objects to the idea?
That's really good idea.
Wow, Underground Camden Tours.
I just thought you were walking around the area and letting people go to certain places, and then you have to speak about that place. But I didn't think it was like, okay, I'm a tour guide, I have to pick out certain things that I want to look at, and now I'm going to talk to the people. I thought it was kind of spontaneous. Now that I actually took part in the tour itself, I realized that there's a lot more to it than just letting people look at shops and food stores. You've actually got to talk about something that's going to be engaging.
Essentially, what we want to do is just try to assess the knowledge of the people that came to us. We also try to talk about a bit about Camden and the graffiti and why it's important, how it's a form of expression, and try to move away from the negative connotations, because there's a lot of negative connotations in regards to graffiti. We also got to meet new people, which is very important, and essentially just want to raise awareness about this social enterprise opportunity.
I got this amazing opportunity to work with these guys at Catch-22 as part of the Hive project to train up some young people to be tour guides, and it's been amazing because I never could have imagined that they would have made so much progress so fast.
We're going to talk about this.
I can do that one.
All of it, or should I share the work?
If I forget anything, just jump in afterwards.
At first I was nervous, I was pretty nervous, but I slowly got into my groove. I felt like we gave a good Camden tour.
So you had someone that gave more like factual information that kind of gave you more knowledge about the street art, and then you had the other tour guide person who had the more humorous side to it, and they really like gelled quite well.
Everyone during the feedback told us that they learned a lot of new things that they might have not known about Camden. So that really gave me a smile, really, you know. So I'm smiling right now. So yeah, it's nice.
Since the initiation of this social enterprise, I hadn't actually, from the beginning, I wasn't actually part of the main on the street force for this tour guide. I was more background. People like Mohammed and Ty, they were like the original tour guides. It was suggested by Simon to me that I try my hand at actually getting out there and experiencing it. And I thought, why not? I don't really have much to lose, and I might enjoy it. Experience what we've been planning, like see the actual results of all our work. And so yeah, I came along for the ride, and it was actually really enjoyable. I think I actually enjoy it more than doing the background work.
I really have high hope for the future. We're obviously looking to expand more because we're currently a small social enterprise. But it's always good to be optimistic, and I know that as long as I'm able to put the work in and my fellow co-tour guides are able to put the work in, we're going to see results very shortly. Just patience.
How do I pause it?
Yeah, great, there you go.
Cool, all right. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. We really enjoyed making it. If you'd like to get involved, please come and have a chat with myself, Simon, or Brian. We're all wearing the branded clothing. Also, please visit our website to learn more about what we do and to get yourself booked onto one of our tours. That's undergroundcamdentours.com. Thank you.
Okay, so now we've got 10 minutes left before the next session, ladies and gentlemen. So thank you to our speakers. Certainly you've given some time for you to ask some questions. So please now take the opportunity and ask some questions. Who's going to go first? Otherwise, you made me stop them when they didn't need to. If you don't ask questions, please. Or make comments. You can make comments or ask questions. Thank you. As far away as you can possibly be from me with a microphone.
Good, yeah. So thank you for sharing your views. My question is specifically about sustainability, and I guess this will be mostly addressed to you, Andrew, because you really spoke about sustainability, and you mentioned that 80% of the profits actually stay within the community, go back to community. So it's great, you have this very lofty goal of alleviating poverty, of lifting these communities out of this systematic poverty. So my question is, how can poverty tourism be sustainable if the more successful it becomes at realizing these goals, the more obsolete it renders itself?
Well, that's a very good question. I think the first thing I'd say is that as we've grown and as the impact has grown, it's certainly true that we now have 16,000 people a year come through Dharavi on the slum tour. Our growth model is not purely based on expanding the slum tours. In fact, we've started to now set up other tours. We've got a number of city tours in Mumbai now, things like street food tours. We've got bicycle tours, and we've got a portfolio of those. So our goal is definitely not to keep growing the number of tourists who go through the slum. It wouldn't be appropriate to do that. And in terms of the impact on poverty, I genuinely believe in the power of education to continue. I don't think there's a limit when it comes to improving the quality of education in an area like Dharavi. I think we are still a long, long way away from a time when the impact is so great that nobody now needs any more improvement in their quality of education. It would be a great problem to have. I hope we can get to that point one day.
Thank you. We're keen to give you as many opportunities for questions as possible, so who'd like to go next, please? Thank you.
My question is to you still. I want to know, okay, as your tour becomes more successful, have you thought about the idea of replicating in other countries, partnering with other people, going there to, see their own slums and see if you can replicate what you've achieved in those slums?
We do. Our dream is to replicate this model as well, firstly, across India as widely as we can. In 2014, we started working in Delhi as well, up in the north. And although we're still at a smaller scale there than we are in Dharavi, we run the same tours in a slum community called Sanjay Colony, and we run education programs in Sanjay as well. I'm sure in the future, as we grow, we'll add a third city. Other countries, we haven't got to that stage yet, but I mean, it would be tremendously exciting if we could do that one day. I hope we can.
Thank you very much. Questions, particularly for our colleagues who've not had a chance to answer a question? Sorry about this.
Simon, and I'm sorry, I forgot. Vincent. How long does it take you to work with a guide, to train them to guide, and how do you do that?
I'll set you up. So that's a great question, and it really does depend, but the best person to answer that, because it's quite interesting how he started, is Vincent here.
Okay. Is that loud enough? Yeah. So I actually kind of came into it by accident. I was visiting the Hive, the kind of youth support center. I was just visiting them because I noticed they had table tennis tables inside. I was asking them if I could bring my dad along to play, and they were like, "No, it's a youth center," and they kind of explained how it all works. And then they brought up they said, "Oh, we're looking for more tour guides for our social enterprise. Would you like to be involved?" And I said, "Yeah, why not? Why not? It sounds interesting." And so they sort of took me on a free mock tour. So just shadowing sort of one of the guys. And from there, within a week, Simon was like, "Hey, would you be available next week to do it, to co-tour with someone?" So I just asked him to send me a bunch of information on it, sort of organized it into a little script type thing, and then the day before we just did a little practice run, and yeah, that was it. It was literally 2 hours of training pretty much to get started.
And so the idea is that we're there to help everyone, or to provide something for everyone, regardless of ability. And some people pick it up really quickly. Some people will need a lot more coaching, but that is the whole point. And someone mentioned sustainability, but there's also sustainable community, which is allied to the notion of resilient communities. And London can be a very transient place. People can be priced out because of the crazy property situation of their own areas. You could have someone coming into an area like Camden, for example, running tours, making loads of money, and this was debated last year about adventure tourism, about how much of that money stays in the host country, and then disappearing back to, where they live, for example, outside of London. With this, with Unseen Tours, and obviously with Reality Gives, the money is staying inside the area, and I think that's a really important thing, because even in London, we have massive wealth disparities, we have social issues, it can be very transient. Precarity is now an expression that many people are familiar with. So it's not just about sustainability in terms of environmentalism, but it's also about sustainable communities where the communities can speak for themselves, and where they can sustain themselves, and where they can have the tools and the income to have that social cohesion, because London, where there's no sense of community and all that kind of thing, but there is actually, and things like this can really help. And Unseen Tours, for example, who also operate in Camden, in the same way that the older people that we spoke to in Somerstown had a chance to speak to Vincent and see, they're not all kind of tearing come down the pavement on bicycles trying to knock us over. They're actually just how we were when we were young. And if you've ever done anything intergenerational, that's absolutely the most amazing thing, because you just see the light bulbs go on. And I think Vincent also sort of, his perceptions of older people change as well. But like that, or whether it's Unseen Tours with Mike the Mod in Camden, you really do get an insight into other people's lives, and that empathy allows you to see that the people on the other side of that fence or the other side of the pavement are actually just like you, and that helps to build social cohesion. And so, sustainability comes in many forms and has many different aspects to it. I don't know if, because you've not said anything yet, do you want to say something about that?
I'm afraid, ladies and gentlemen, we ran out of time for this one, and so can you please thank all of our panel for their contributions, and wish all those ventures, I'm sure, the best for the future. Can I also encourage as many of you as possible to stay? We're now going to deal with one of the biggest issues facing the planet at the moment, which is oceans of plastic, I believe it's been titled. And can I ask the presenters please to make themselves known for that session? They have 6 minutes each, and Harold has given me a bell that I will have to use, I think, because this is going to be quite a complicated session. So please, if you're leaving, please, thank you very much for having joined us. So we then give some seats for people who haven't had an opportunity to sit down and so on. Again, thank the people on the panel, and see if we can clear the panel ready for the next session, please.